Welcome to Impactful Advice, a podcast from Berged, a research and strategy consulting firm. Each episode will delve into research methodologies and insights that inform how to develop and implement strategies. Subscribe to Impactful Advice on your preferred podcast platform for impactful insights and advice. In our ongoing series, we delve into various aspects of strategy, from the importance of strategy to how small businesses can leverage different strategies to grow. In our first episode, we were joined by Berged's Managing Director James Maposa, where he took us through what strategy is, why it is important, and how to create one. In this episode, James returns to talk about the role of executive leadership in shaping and driving strategic change. James, welcome back to the podcast. It's always a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me, Zivai, and yes, thanks for the coffee as well. We're going to have a good session.
Thank you. So, James, we're going to talk about the role of leadership in implementing strategic change. From your experience and knowledge, what is the role of the executive team in strategic change within an organization?
I'd say, in my opinion, the role of the executive team is to be the architects as well as the custodian of any strategy. So when an executive team is appointed, one of the first things that they do or ask themselves is to say, in terms of the business, is it doing well? Why is it doing well? Why is it doing well? And what can be done to increase or enhance its success or progress? So in that, they become architects from a viewpoint of, we see where the business is, but is it possible for us to take it further? And if we're going to take it further, how further do we take it? So they are the architects, right, in terms of building the strategy or shaping it. And then the second thing is that they are also the custodians of the strategy, as in, once we've developed the strategy, we are also responsible and accountable for its execution, as well as its outputs and outcomes, and finally impact. So I would say the roles that they play is the creator being the architect, as well as the owner of the strategy being through being the custodian.
Okay, thank you. So, what does the executive team need to do in implementing strategic change? What are the steps involved in that process?
Okay, so I guess when it comes to initiating or rolling out strategic change, the first thing to do, which I feel is important, is to understand what the problems or challenges are. This is like an investigative analysis where you get information to say, how are we faring internally? How are we faring when compared to the competition? And how are we faring as an organization with regards to being future fit? Because sometimes it isn't about the competition, sometimes it isn't about internal capability. It's also about how things are changing and they may impact your future fortunes. So after going through the initial evaluation of where we are, you are now in a position to say, where do we need to go? So from there, it's the strategy formulation itself to say, for instance, if a strategy already exists, let's review that strategy in relation to the challenges and problems or the gaps and opportunities that we've identified, right? And then after reviewing that strategy, we are now in a position to say this strategy actually holds water or it doesn't. And if it doesn't hold water, maybe that's the signal for us to put a new strategy in place. And then after putting the strategy in place, we go to the next phase, which is allocating responsibilities for the execution of the strategy. So it's not just about responsibilities, it's responsibilities as well as resources and criteria that measure whether that strategy is being implemented as intended. And then post the allocation is now the execution of the strategy. And I think the most important thing about strategy execution is to say, setting timelines, to say by this time we need to have achieved maybe outcome A of the set strategy. And periodic check-ins are also very important to say, how are we faring in terms of the execution, as well as the outputs and the impact of that given strategy. So I'd say those are the steps. I mean, if I have to summarize, the steps are where you first gather information, and then after gathering information, review the existing strategy. Then after reviewing the existing strategy, you either optimize the existing or you develop a new strategy. Then after that, you allocate resources and responsibilities, and then you set up a monitoring and evaluation framework, and then you track progress. And then as you are tracking progress, you also refine and evolve your strategy so that it aligns with probably new challenges and new opportunities that come into effect once your strategy is being rolled out.
So you talk about responsibilities and resources within an organization and the important role that they play in strategic change. There have been instances where thereby there have been internal pushback from the strategy that is being introduced by the executive team. So how does executives communicate and implement strategic changes across different levels of the organization?
Yeah. So when it comes to pushback, I found that one of the biggest drivers of internal pushback is ownership of the strategy. So whenever a strategy is being developed, it's always good to involve as many staff members as possible in its crafting or development. Because if only the executive team come up with the strategy and go and communicate that strategy and its rollout to the team members, I feel the team will behave as if the strategy is owned by the leadership team. However, when you are crafting or formulating the strategy by involving all of the relevant stakeholders, including the staff team members, there's an element of empowerment which is being given to the staff team members. And because they have a say in the development of the strategy, within reason, of course, they also identify, embrace, and own components of that strategy and its implementation as well as success. So, one of the ways of being an effective communicator as a leader is to talk about the strategy before it's developed, ask the team members to weigh in with their opinion on the strategic direction that wants to be taken by the organization, include some of their feedback in the development of the overall strategy, and communicate the strategy once it has been developed so that there is an understanding of what has been accepted, what has not been accepted, the reason why it's been accepted, the reason why it hasn't been accepted, and then finally getting overall buy-in by communicating all elements of the strategy in detailed workshop sessions where you unpack everything. It's what are the inputs, what is the process, what are the outcomes, what is the overall impact, who stands to benefit, why they stand to benefit, and at the end of the day, the opportunities that are going to come from the implementation and rollout of the strategy. So collective ownership of a strategy is one way of overcoming pushback, and in addition to that, there also needs to be celebration of that strategy as you achieve and go through each of the milestones.
So now that you have buy-in from the team, how do you ensure that there is balance during that transitional period? So where you're moving from the previous strategy to the new strategy that you're implementing?
Okay, so I think continuity comes to, I mentioned initially the issue of resource allocation. Sometimes some strategies are, for lack of a better word, grandiose. So because they're grand, you tend to spread your team a little thin, and it could result in burnout and apathy when it comes to the successful rollout of that strategy. So a lot of time and effort needs to go into resource allocation, as well as ensuring that the team members that are tasked with fulfilling a component of the strategy are adequately resourced, have the capacity to do so, have the capability to do so, and if not, maybe that's when resources can be allocated for outsourcing of some of the rollout of the strategy. I'm guessing the operational elements, and then in addition to that, there also needs to be, so first of all is making sure that the success of that strategy has been adequately resourced. I can't Then the second thing is, as you transition from one strategy to the next, there needs to be a cutoff point to say, based on our periodic assessment and evaluation of the strategy, we feel that the old strategy is coming to its close and the new strategy needs to now be implemented. So there are some markers or some success markers that you use to evaluate or determine whether the old strategy now needs to be put to bed and the new strategy needs to come into place. I mean, so we see a lot of this in the branding space, where an organization migrates from an old brand to a new brand. And some of the reasons that would be motivating why the old strategy should be put to bed and the new strategy starts to be rolled out is how the brand is being consumed. So back in the day, a lot of the brands were consumed physically. We walk into a store, we take a look at your billboard, we interact with your people. But now what's happening is that as people are interacting more and more with your brand online and digitally, you no longer need a three-dimensional brand or iconography, right? You'd rather deal with it 2D because your stakeholder consumes or interacts with your brand face to face, as in their eyes on the face of the screen. So there's no need to have a three-dimensional brand. So again, it's just evaluating and seeing when you need to transition from one strategy to the other using the success markers, and then allocating resources that ensure the old strategy is put to bed and then the new strategy is adopted and starting to be implemented and starts to be implemented.
Yeah, you raise an important point there about outsourcing, and I just want you to touch on the role of outsourcing some of the strategic work. You know, we've seen organizations bring in management consultants to assist with that process. What's your take on that? Is it better to build internally? Do we need assistance from a strategy consultant?
I think there's a balance. What you'll find is that in terms of industry knowledge, sometimes internally the organization knows a lot more than a management consulting. What a management consultant brings to the fore is probably a different perspective, not a new and fresh, but just a different perspective to say, as they are going through the information that you have as an organization, they look at it differently to the way that you would look at it, right? And then the balance should come from whether it's business as usual. So for instance, if most of your revenue is coming from the business as usual, what you are good at, what your core is, it's important to have people from within come up with ideas that are centered around your growth. However, if you're exploring new ideas and exploring new opportunities and new territories, maybe you need some external help to guide you in terms of how do you position effectively for those new opportunities. So I would say there's a balance that should exist in terms of our strategy. Is it focusing on our core strengths? If it's focusing on our core offering and our core strengths, maybe it's important for us to assess ourselves internally and see how we can position effectively to take advantage of the opportunities, also considering our competition. But if it's a new offering, new territories that we're going into, new partnerships that we're entering into, maybe the onboarding of a consultant to assist us to navigate and be better prepared for those areas is something that needs to be considered.
Oh, thanks. So, in as much as you bring in an external consultant, the custodian of the strategy is the executive team. Those are the people that you are expecting to lead the organization, right? So I want to bring in a different element to that. We've seen several companies, when they go through a strategic change, they bring in new executives to join the team to lead some elements of that strategic change that they are taking. What's your take on that? Are there advantages of hiring externally, or should organizations just stick to the people that they already have within their fold?
Yeah, good question. But again, it also depends on what the strategic intent of the organization is. So sometimes internally a business matures, you have an executive management team that has existed, probably that has been at the helm for 5, 10, 15, let's say 10, 15 years, right? And they are using the same tricks to compete against the competition and grow sales and deliver shareholder return. But then as you look at the external environment, it's becoming more dynamic. There's a lot more information to use, and you have new entrants also coming into the fore who could cause you problems. Maybe because of that level of maturity from a strategic thinking or organizational thinking perspective, you might want to hire a new person who brings in a fresh perspective, who has different ideas that can be used to render the organization successful. So I guess it's an issue of balancing out. You don't want to fire or replace the entire executive management team. It's just you need to hire in a way where there's balance, where you have new, fresh ideas balanced with the older, more substantive and results-driven ideas, and working with those two to try and come up with a viable solution for you over the next 5 years. I mean, I'd liken it to a soccer team. There are seasoned players who have played all cup competitions, who have gone through the ringer when it comes to opportunity and challenges. So they are the level-headed people who say, this is the core that we keep together. And then you introduce new, younger, faster players who haven't really been exposed to that type of pressure and atmosphere. And then the older player is the one who will be guiding the younger player to say, based on your talents, this is what you should be doing, this is how you should position. And then the younger player will also be coming up with ideas which will be projecting onto the older players to say, maybe let's try this, let's try another thing, let's try another thing. And that could come up with just this ecosystem of opportunity where you have old ideas being revisited and you have new ideas being explored.
Hey, and finally, James, what advice would you give executive teams that are about to embark on strategic change?
I'd say what's very, very important is not to alienate your staff. The biggest thing when you want to roll out a strategy which you believe works, make sure that there's buy-in from the ground up. That's the most important thing. And then after getting the buy-in from your staff team as well as from the board, the other thing that you need to focus on is the resources. Do you have enough resources for you to be able to roll out the strategy effectively? Once that has been done, it's coming up with an evaluation framework which tracks progress and also tracks how effective your strategy has been from a rollout and results perspective. And then the other thing is room for growth. You know, as you are rolling out your strategy, learn, cover the gaps, explore new opportunities, and continue to evolve the strategy in such a way that you continue to get the best out of it. And I guess the last thing about a strategy is that even though strategy is 3-5 years, always break it down into annual, quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily, how would I say, results of points of action. That way you have a feel that there's momentum around the execution or rollout of your strategy. Because if you don't have that periodic check-in and assessment of your strategy, it takes you a while to realize whether it is working or not. Yeah, I think those are the key points.
No, that's great. Thank you very much, James, for making the time to join us on the podcast. We always appreciate your valuable insights, and we hope to welcome you back sometime in the future.
Thank you, Zivai, and thanks again for the coffee.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you for listening to the Impactful Advice podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode about leadership and strategic change. If you found this episode insightful, please share it with your colleagues, and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to receive notifications of future editions. To learn more about Berged and the work that we do, please visit our website at www.berged.co.za. Till next time, bye.